helps clarify your own thinking. It forces you to pin down ideas that might be vague. It helps identify what research processes you actually need to do.
And you get feedback earlier.
Exactly. Plus, it avoids that terrifying feeling of facing a mountain of writing right at the deadline. Chip away at it.
Breaking it down. They also suggest drafting a tentative structure, a table of contents, early on, even if it changes.
Even if parts are just placeholders, it gives you a roadmap, a framework to hang ideas on. You can see the shape emerging. And yeah, it's flexible. You'll likely revise it a lot.
What about the fear of false starts? Writing something early that turns out to be wrong.
The book says don't worry too much about that.
Yeah.
Early concrete work, even if it's not perfect or needs changing later, is still valuable. It gets you engaging with the literature, using the tools, finding your writing voice. It might even help you relay sooner if you need to adjust your topic, which is actually a good thing. Saves time in the long run.
So action leads to clarity, even if the action isn't perfect first time. What about writing different bits simultaneously? Not necessarily chapter 1, then 2, then 3.
Yeah, that's a great advantage of word processors. If you're working on analysis for one chapter and literature for another, you can write fragments for both.
Juggling different sections.
Right. If you get stuck on one part, you can switch to another and keep the momentum going. It's a really practical strategy.
Keeps you productive. There's a nice story in the book about a student, Karen, feeling overwhelmed by literature.
Yes. She felt buried under hundreds of papers. But when pushed to identify the really core ideas driving her topic, she realized it boiled down to just 4 key concepts.
Wow, only 4.
Yeah. And those 4 ideas became the backbone of her literature review. It's a good reminder to look for the essential structure amidst the chaos.
Find the signal in the noise. The book also stresses focusing the scope, not trying to boil the ocean.
Absolutely critical. They use Martin's example. He had lots of exciting ideas, but realized he had to narrow down to what was realistically achievable within his time frame for a master's.
Quality over quantity. Do one thing well.
Precisely. Better to have a deep, strong study on a focused topic than a superficial skim over too much ground.
And as your research progresses, you need to keep revisiting that introduction, right? Keep it aligned.
Yes, constantly. Your understanding evolves, your focus might shift subtly. Revisiting the intro ensures it accurately reflects where the thesis actually ended up.
Avoids that disconnect examiners might spot.
Exactly. Keeps the promise you made at the start consistent with what you deliver.
Okay. The book also has a tip for structuring the end of each chapter.
Yeah, a good one. They suggest ending chapters with both a discussion analysis section and a clear summary.
What's the purpose of that?
The discussion part lets you reflect on the key findings of that chapter, maybe limitations, significance. The summary then recaps the main achievements and, importantly, bridges to the next chapter. It helps the reader follow the thread of your argument.
Guiding the reader step by step. Nice. How about tackling the literature review itself, finding your way through all those papers?
They suggest a gateways and paths strategy. Find a few key gateway sources, seminal papers, key reviews.
Through searching or supervisor suggestions?
Both. Then follow the paths, check their references, see who cited them, explore related work, use a broad range of search tools, be inclusive in what you consider relevant initially.
Start central, then branch out systematically. Makes sense. What about the actual writing phase? The book suggests a strict 9 to 5 might not always work best.
For the main write-up, yeah. They argue that sometimes deeper immersion is needed. Really getting into the flow, understanding the whole narrative arc. Might mean longer, more focused bursts rather than rigidly clocking hours.
Intense focus for the final push and distractions. Big no-no.
Definitely. Music with lyrics, TV on, things that split your attention. They stress creating a focused environment for productive writing.
Minimize interference. What if you hit a small roadblock? Get stuck on a reference or a sentence?
Don't just stop. That's the warning. Find another thesis task you can do. Attack the problem differently later. Keep moving forward somehow. The responsibility for progress is yours.
Keep the wheels turning. And finally, honesty about progress, especially with your supervisor.
Crucial. Hiding problems or lack of progress just makes things worse later. Open communication is key. They share a cautionary tale about a student named Delia who hid her struggles, and it didn't end well.
Honesty, problem solving, early writing. Key ingredients. Okay, let's dig into that first chapter, the introduction. Purpose. Introduce the work. Keep it fairly short.
Yeah, roughly 7-10 pages is the suggestion. And it needs 5 key parts. Context, problem statement, aim and scoop, significance, and an overview of the thesis structure.
5 components.
Yeah.
How do you establish the context effectively? Situate your work.
You need to place your study within the existing research landscape. Show you're in dialogue with others. They give an example of responding to a gap in a research agenda.
So connect it to ongoing conversations.
Right. Or, alternatively, you could start with a compelling story or real-world example to draw the reader in and show relevance that way, like Colleen's thesis mentioned in the book.
Okay. And setting the tone, your writing style, right from the start.
Yes, be conscious of your style, tone, key terms. Look at top journals in your field. What style do they use? Imitate that to find an appropriate academic voice.
Learn from the pros in your field. Next, stating the problem and motivating the study. Why is this research needed?
This part explains the specific issue your research addresses and why it's important. It's not a full lit review here, but you'll likely reference literature to show gaps or shortcomings that justify your work.
Make the case for why this matters.
Exactly. Aim for relevance, clarity, definitiveness. In quantitative work, this often involves stating relationships between variables or posing a clear hypothesis or question.
Clear problem, clear justification. Then the aim and scope, what you intend to achieve, and the boundaries.
The aim should flow logically from the problem, and ideally keep it singular, one main aim. Avoid multiple disconnected aims.
Focus is key.
And scope means setting clear limits. What won't you cover? Michael's example focused on just one aspect of listening theory that defined his scope. Yeldam's thesis, contrastingly, had multiple aims that weren't clearly linked.
So one clear aim, clear boundaries. What about specific research questions or hypotheses in the intro?
Opinions vary a bit, but the book leans towards including at least a general statement of them or ensuring a very clear link to the aim. It gives the examiner immediate focus.
Helps them know what you're testing or exploring. And the book distinguishes aim from hypothesis.
Yes, important difference. Aim is the overall direction or objective. Hypothesis is a specific testable proposition. Don't use them interchangeably. They use an archer analogy. The aim is the target direction. The hypothesis is maybe predicting exactly where the arrow will land.
Nice analogy. And crucially, revise this intro chapter as you go.
Absolutely vital. Your aim or scope might shift subtly as you research. Keep the intro updated so it accurately reflects the final thesis. Avoid that disconnect. One author shares accidentally leaving an old implication in their intro examiner's notice.
Keep it aligned. They also suggest starting the conclusion chapter around the same time as the intro.
Yeah, an interesting idea. Work on both throughout. They act as anchors, shaping the argument's flow from start to finish.
Start with the end in mind. Okay, moving on. Developing critical thinking and writing those background chapters. The book says true critical review comes after doing some of your own work.
That's a key point. Initially, you read literature to understand it, arguments, agreements, disagreements. That's necessary, but not deeply critical yet.
Your own research gives you a new lens.
Exactly. It provides the perspective needed to truly evaluate the strengths and weaknesses of prior work in a more informed way.
So how do you approach reading critically?
Read broadly, but always connect it back to your aim and scope. Ask, how does this help me? And write while you read. Grapple with ideas, identify key arguments. This helps you figure out which prior work might lead towards solutions for your problem.
Active engagement, not passive absorption. How do you build that critical muscle?
By developing your own internal criteria for judging arguments. The book suggests drafting your lit review, then setting it aside, then reworking it specifically to articulate your critical criteria. Sharing drafts helps too.
Think like an examiner.
Basically, yes. Build your own toolbox of evaluation questions.
And the reading process itself has phases.
Typically, yes. First, just understanding the research. Then, looking closer, do the results support the conclusions? How robust was the method? Finally, assessing significance and dependability, maybe considering author reputation, but cautiously.
From understanding to evaluation to assessing impact. When writing background chapters, how do you set the right level of context? Not too basic, not too expert.
They use Tony's thesis on laser grading farmland as an example. Include enough foundational info for an intelligent outsider, like a policymaker, to grasp it. But avoid lengthy rehashing of basic textbook stuff. Find the balance.
Informative, but not condescending. What about discussing current practices and tech in the field?
Essential. Show you understand the current state of the art. Then you can use your knowledge of common flaws or limitations in previous work to pinpoint the gaps your research fills. Justifies your investigation. Awareness of limitations is expected at PhD level.
Show the gap, justify your work, Preliminary investigations or pilot studies fit in here too.
They can be very valuable. Testing existing theories in your context, refining your own hypotheses. Peter's failed experiments led to deeper understanding. Even seemingly negative results can be insightful early on.
Learning from early exploration, and linking your developing research questions back to the background.
Yes, as your understanding deepens, your critical perspective sharpens. You might need to define terms more precisely. Your core research questions might have emerged implicitly. Now you need to make them explicit and show how they arise logically from the limitations identified in the background chapters.
Making the logical chain clear. So, what should good background chapters achieve overall?
They should structure the existing knowledge around central ideas, provide a firm base for discussing your own work later, and formulate your research question hypotheses as a logical consequence of that background. Examiners need convincing that your research program makes sense in context.
Justify the why of your research. What absolutely needs to be in there?
Necessary definitions, context, relevant history, an overview of key arguments in the literature with maybe your tentative stance, but not the full debate yet.
Yeah.
And remember, some theses are structured as a series of linked publications, each acting like a mini-thesis.
Okay, background sets the stage. Now, the central chapters presenting your work. Methodology, results, analysis. Needs a clear narrative, right?
Absolutely. These chapters tell the story of your contribution. How you tell that story might depend on the type of contribution. Is it new observations, a new model, an innovative technique?
And the book distinguishes studying something specific versus using it as a case study for broader principles. The potato example.
Yes, a crucial distinction. Are you studying potato farming in Region X just to understand Region X? Or are you using Region X potato farming as a case study to understand, say, sustainable agriculture principles more generally?
Isako's research in Vanuatu illustrates this well.
Very well. It shows how the approach, study versus case study, affects the title, aim, structure, even where the case details appear.
And you need to decide this early. Indecision leads to a mess.
Definitely. Trying to do both or being unclear